Let's talk tight ends on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Adam and Dave to talk about the tight end position, looking back at 2021, looking ahead to 2022. Dave, for the first time in 6 years, Travis Kelce was not the number one PPR tight end. It was Mark Andrews. Is this just a one-year thing? Andrews did play one more game than him, but still averaged nearly a full fantasy point more per game in full PPR. Is this a sea change or what?
No, I don't think so. I think Kelsey's got a great shot to come back and be the number one fantasy tight end, at least in PPR leagues next year. We know that he had a great start to the year, and then he kind of slowed down a little bit toward the second half of the season. He only had one game with more than 15 PPR points from week 12 on. I think he can come back and be strong. We've seen him play well here in the playoffs. You know he's going to be an integral part of that offense in Kansas City. It'll be close between those two, but I like Kelsey the best still.
Yeah, he averaged 100 yards and a touchdown in 3 playoff games. So what's your overall thought on the tight end position from 2021? What stood out to you?
Do you remember when we talked about the top 12 average for wide receivers, how it was exactly the same year over year? Happened at the tight end position too. Top 10.9 PPR points per game was the average of the top 12 tight ends. And it really wasn't that far off from where it was in 2019, which is 11.1. And that's not too far off of where it was in 2018, which is 11.3. So I think if you're right around 11 PPR points for a tight end and 7 for a non-PPR tight end, you can call it 9.5 PPR. I think that's good. I think that's fine. Obviously, when you get to a stud tight end, you would expect more. So think of it as a sliding scale. When you're drafting a tight end in rounds 2 or 3 in the upcoming year, you're looking for someone that's going to get you 13 plus PPR points or 9 to 10 non-PPR points. And then when you get to the late rounds, you'll just be happy to get somebody that can get you double-digit PPR points, maybe even 8 or 9 you'd be happy with, but you hope that they can catch fire a little bit and be one of those rags to riches tight ends that we seem to get a couple of every single season.
Did it still feel like a year where there just weren't that many difference makers at the position? Maybe 3 or 4?
Right. That's really how it felt because Kittle went through some injuries and he missed time. Same thing happened to Darren Waller. Kyle Pitts didn't meet expectations. So there were tight ends, obviously, the Kelce's, the Andrews, the Gronkowski's. Dalton Schultz ended up being the rags to riches guy. That made you feel good and confident about your lineup when you started them. But there were a lot of other tight ends that were just kind of okay. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of guys like Noah Fant, Tyler Higbee. I guess I would call Goddard one of those guys, even though he was top 10 in fantasy points per game, overall fantasy points, consistency, hitting that 11-point mark in PPR more often than other tight ends did. So those tight ends, I guess you're okay with, but there weren't as many that made it, that made the position top heavy. That's, I guess, what I should say. Yeah. But not necessarily top heavy in a way where there's a lot of names at the top. It was really just 3 or 4 guys.
All right, so let's look ahead to 2022. Give me either a sleeper or a breakout or a bust.
Can I give you 3 names that I think can either be – I think they're all going to end up being sleepers, but one might quantify as a breakout. The difference between the two really just depends on your definitions. But I'm looking for tight ends who are young, and I'm looking for tight ends that have a chance to finish, like you've talked about, Adam, top 2 in targets on their own team. Brevin Jordan in Houston, who I think is an okay talent and certainly could have a good opportunity in Houston to see more work like he did late in 2021. Tommy Tremble in Carolina, who's never been known for his pass catching skills, but when you watch him play, he's athletic. So I wonder if he could get a little bit more involved in that offense. We don't know who the coordinator is going to be or what that system will exactly be like. So put that one on hold, maybe a final round pick. And then Adam Troutman, we talked about him a year ago at this time, 9 months ago, certainly had some big time breakout potential as the top tight end in New Orleans. We know that's an offense. All 3 of these guys are going to be in new offenses compared to what they were in last year. Troutman did show some signs of life toward the end of the 2021 season. I'm wondering if he can carry that over, and I'm wondering who his quarterback will be.
No, Dave, I have not looked to see if all of the top 5 tight ends were first or second on their team in targets. I'm a little worried about one of them. Maybe he wasn't. So Andrews definitely was. Kelce definitely was. Kittle had to have been, right? Yeah.
In total targets or targets per game?
Total targets.
Yeah, I would imagine he was up there.
Wow. You know what? It was the guy I was worried about was Gronkowski, and he was not. He was 3rd in targets.
Mm-hmm.
That is not typical for a top 5 tight end. Let's go ahead and check on.
I'm looking at Kittle right now.
He was 2nd in targets. 10 more than Ayuk. And then number 3 was Dalton Schultz. Was he top? Was he second in targets or third?
He had to have been. What?
Let's
The
see.
other receiver, because Lamb had that terrible finish to the year.
He was tied for second.
There it is.
Tied for second in targets. So only Gronkowski, who was third in targets on his team, was not top 2. And that's basically every single. Now there have been 2 years in a row where a top 5 tight end. Tunyon last year. No. I think Tunyon was third in targets. Anyway, it's almost every year. Every top 5 tight end is first or second on his team in targets. Gronkowski, an exception this year. Oh, you know what, Dave? I'm crazy. I'm looking at points per game. It was Andrews, Kelsey, Schultz, Kittle, and Zach Ertz. Well, how am I supposed to do that? I don't know. Ertz, he changed teams.
We can look it up. We just can't do it right now.
Yeah, all right. This is why you got to listen to the full-length episode of Fantasy Football Today, as we are figuring things out on the fly. For Dave Richard, I am Adam Azer. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Actually, we'll talk to you on Thursday. Fantasy Football.